So in today's video, I'm going to show you the science of sausage rolls. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to cut all of your butter and all of your lard into small chunks. This is going to make it easier to rub in a moment, and it's also going to make it easier when it comes to folding your pastry and getting all of that fat into your pastry. Keep your fat as cool as you possibly can. So once you've chopped it up, if you're waiting for the next step, put it back in the fridge for a while. Another thing you can do is make sure your bowls are cold before you start, run your palette knife under cold water, and run your hands under cold water before starting. So you need to sift your flour. Don't do this from too high up because you'll make a mess, but do it from high enough that you're going to add air into your mixture, because later on that air is going to be your physical raising agent, because it's physically going to expand and help your pastry to puff and become flaky. Add half of your lard and half of your butter into your flour and then rub it in using your fingertips. Same as earlier, keep your fingertips as cold as possible. Run them under the cold tap if need be. Even halfway through, stop, run them under the cold tap again if you can feel that butter is starting to melt. Now, the reason for having two different types of fat, the lard makes the pastry more flaky because of the type of fat that's in it, and the butter tastes better. If you were to do all lard, it would be really flaky, a gorgeous texture, but it wouldn't taste very nice. And then kind of vice versa with the butter. If you used all butter and no lard, it would have a lovely, gorgeous, buttery taste, but it wouldn't have that flaky texture that we're after. So the fat works as a shortening, and what that's doing is coating all of the gluten, which is a protein that's found in flour, so that it doesn't react with the water, because when gluten reacts with water, it becomes strong. And for a pastry, we don't want strong gluten, because otherwise that's going to give us a bread-like texture. We want to keep the texture as light and fluffy as possible, so we want to keep that gluten as soft as possible. So once all that fat is rubbed in and you've got a sort of crumbly texture, it can still be a bit lumpy, a few bits of butter in it as lumps are absolutely fine for this type of pastry. Then the next thing we're going to do is just knead it gently and put it onto the table. Once you've got your dough, the next thing to do is just to gently put it into a square shape, and then you're going to roll it out into a rectangle. Now, once you've got your rectangle, you're going to place a few cubes of your lard and your butter into the centre, and then fold the pastry over in thirds to cover that fat that you've put in the middle. You can then use your rolling pin to press down on the edges to stop any of that leaking out, and then gently use your rolling pin just to kind of squish down a few sections over the top of that fat, and then begin to roll it out. And you're going to repeat this step several times until all of that fat, all that butter and that lard, until it's all rolled in completely. You don't want to see any patches of butter and lard. If you can see those, then you need to keep rolling out. Now, what you absolutely mustn't do at this stage is squish it all back together and roll out again. Only fold. By folding, what you're doing, as well as putting that fat in between, you're also trapping air inside your pastry, and that air is your physical raising agent. So when it goes into the oven, that's going to expand, because air is going to physically expand and that's going to push those layers that you're now folding in, it's going to push those upwards and cause layers to form within your pastry. So it's really important that you don't scrunch it up and that you're just folding. So this action of folding, this is a mechanical raising agent because we're mechanically adding air into the pastry. When it then goes into the oven and that air expands, that is a physical raising agent. So a bit like in the profiteroles, we've got a mechanical raising agent and a physical raising agent working together. Once you're happy that you've got all of that fat mixed in as smoothly as possible and you've folded it as many times as you can, and remember, the more times you fold it and roll it out again, the more layers you're going to have, the more that's going to puff up, the better your texture is going to be. Once you're happy with that, then the next thing to do is to carefully cut it, and then obviously depending on what you're going to use it for, here I'm making sausage rolls, so I'm just cutting it, adding a small amount of sausage meat into the centre of each one and rolling them over. I'm just adding a milk glaze to the top of my sausage rolls so that when they go in the oven, this will help to brown them. Now, the reason I've chosen milk for my glaze is because within milk we've got proteins and fats, and they're going to mix together, and when cooked at a high temperature, which my sausage rolls will be, that will cause a Maillard reaction, which will help to brown the top of my sausage rolls. As well as that, there'll be caramelisation taking place from the sugars that are in milk. All of that together is going to give it an absolutely wonderful smell, and it's going to make it look much more appealing.